Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. In the lead up to the federal budget, there was a lot of talk about what it would do for women and whether it would fix the perception that the government doesn't get women's issues. Now that the budget dust has settled, I wanted to get an idea of whether economic outcomes for women have improved or at least will improve as a result of the budget. Jessica Irvine is a senior economics writer with the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Jess, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Good to be here, Sean.
So, up front, post-budget, are Australian women better off or not? Or at least will they be better off or not?
Well, nobody's worse off, I don't think. But on balance, it's pretty marginal. You know, expectations were pretty high going into this thing because there's been such a lot of talk about women's issues and, you know, all the high-profile cases that we've had in Parliament and that discussion. I think hopes were pretty high and we were pretty disappointed on that front. If you were looking for radical societal altering, earth-shattering reforms that will redraw the gender boundaries in some way, that's not what we've done.
Okay, now the budget did include a separate women's statement which talked about female-dominated industries like travel and hospitality and the fact that they were more affected by COVID restrictions. It also talked about the importance of increasing workforce participation and improving women's safety and economic security. Did it actually do any of those things? I mean, the words were there, but was there anything tangible to come out of it?
Look, there were a lot of measures in this budget, itty-bitty things that add up to something. The biggest dollar spend that we saw in this area was on childcare. So we are throwing an extra $1.7 billion at childcare subsidies over 3 years. But just to contextualise that, childcare subsidies cost the budget about $10 billion a year. So 1.7 over 3 is about, half a bill, out of 10 bill, that's about maybe a 5% boost per year. It's not
going to move the dial that much.
No. I mean, it helps for some of the parents with multiple children in childcare, and we've removed the annual cap for families so that if you're a high-income, heavy user of childcare services, you won't reach that terrible point in the year where your childcare subsidy runs out.
Right. Now, is the idea about that providing the opportunity for women who are, there are more primary caregivers who are women than men. So is the idea with the childcare to at least give them the opportunity to go back to work if they so choose?
Yeah, look, childcare is one part of this really tricky equation that mostly women do the figures on because they tend to be the secondary income earner. So we apply this analysis to the women's income. So if you go back to work after parenthood, you've got 3 things that take money out. You've got money coming in from your boss, that's great, but you're going to lose money in tax, you lose money in what it costs for childcare, and you lose money in the withdrawal of family tax benefits and other benefits, which are admirably means tested, which means that we don't, just let you have them no matter how rich you are, but they drag out a certain proportion of your income as it goes up so that you're effectively losing out on a benefit. So this is an incredibly tricky and gnarly area for policymakers. They're called effective marginal tax rates. And this is the dire sort of calculus that women run when they're like, shall I go back to work? Well, once I pay for childcare, I lose income taxes and I'm not getting the family benefits that I was previously getting, it doesn't make much sense. And analysis shows that you can lose about 90% or more of your earnings if you're a woman returning to work on the 4th or 5th day.
Wow.
And, just to sort of give a sense of what a deeply ingrained problem this is with the system, What I said initially about, it's not necessarily a woman's problem. If he was the primary caregiver, he'd have the same disincentive in the system, which comes back to who looks after the children, which goes back to paid parental leave arrangements. And there is absolutely nothing about paid parental leave in the budget. And all the sort of women's groups that I talked to in the lead up to this budget were like, if we could just boost paid parental leave to 26 weeks, split it evenly between men and women so that they become equal caregivers from the beginning, and then it wouldn't be the case that it's always the calculus on the woman's income as to whether she should go back to work. It might be the man's. And you could radically change the whole way that we work and that we raise children. We're not doing that in this budget.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating because I've been writing about these sorts of things for almost 2 decades now. And I don't really see how you can unstitch that sort of thing with one budget, really.
Jess, stay with me. We'll be back in a minute. Jessica Irvine is a senior economics writer with the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. So, Jess, one budget can't change everything, but should we be thinking about this more as an issue around not so much gender, but low income? Because, unfortunately, women get paid less than men. So by addressing it sort of broadly as a low-income earner issue rather than a gender issue, would that get us any further, do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And it really is the main driver of all these poor outcomes for women is they have less income. You know, they've got less super because they've got less income. They have less economic security because they don't control the financial resources necessarily in the household. So that is an interesting way to come at it. And it's definitely, you know, there's a little bit for low to mid income earners with the extension of the Lamito tax offset. And this is another thing they could be looking at going forward because the next stage of tax cuts, which come in a couple more years, are entirely at the high income end of the spectrum. And this budget doesn't actually tackle that problem either. So, I mean, you could see space in the next couple of years to reshape that and really get the taxes down for low-income people. We could do a lot more on that. And, you know, surveys would suggest that low-income people are more sensitive in their labour market supply in response to the incentives that they face and the tax penalties from working. So, I mean, I think that's to think of women as, you know, unfortunately clustering in the low-income professions and roles. You know, if you did sort of come at it by just not necessarily helping women, but helping all low-income people, that would have a knock-on effect for women.
Okay, you mentioned just then when you were answering that question about superannuation, and that's a real issue because women definitely retire with less in their super accounts than men, and part of that is genetics. Women have children and therefore necessarily have time out of the workplace. How do we address that? And the government did sort of nothing on that. And there was sort of talk about parental leave, keeping superannuation payments being paid, but that didn't come through. How do we address that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say on the genetics, yes, women must carry the baby, but once the baby's in the world, both men and women, in my view, are perfectly able to care for the child. So the genetics only gets you so far. So, we were hoping for there to be super paid on parental leave, which would give you 18 weeks more super on top of the government scheme. That didn't happen. There was a little bit in terms of employers have to pay women earning $450 or less a month super because they had previously sort of excluded people on such low incomes from sort of not wanting to bother employers with having to run that admin. So there's more for super there. But the reason why women have less super, again, is that they earn less income. And there is an amazing statistic that of women retiring today, 1 in 3 have absolutely zero super to their name because they...
1 in 3?
1 in 3. So you would expect that to improve as we've had compulsory super and more women sort of are retiring at a time when they have, you know, had some time in the workforce and they've had the compulsory super. But again, it sort of goes back to within the household, you know, mum's not working, dad's working, and you consider, you know, if dad's got super, the household has superannuation. It might not necessarily be held in the women's name. So that's probably explains that. But again, that's not necessarily, you know, that might be an outcome that's good for an individual family, but we know that families don't always stay the same, that there are relationships that break down, and we can say we'll leave it to families to decide if dad wants to have the super and do the income and mum's not going to. But it comes back to this deeper problem that we're seeing with women escaping domestic violence or women just leaving relationships with their finances in complete tatters because they gave up the job of earning income and they suffer a financial penalty if the relationship breaks down.
Yeah, you mentioned domestic violence there. There was $1.1 billion in the budget over 4 years, but that's got to cover a lot of things. Do you think it'll make a meaningful difference in terms of women's safety initiatives?
Yeah, look, I'm probably not the best place to answer that. Frontline workers would know. I mean, that is a sizable slab of money. It's a sizable problem. There are some interesting things in there. One of them is about helping women, providing them with immediate access to funding and emergency financial support when they leave a domestic violence situation. And that's actually something I've been chatting to Bruce Chapman about, he's the guy who invented HECS and income contingent loans, and whether you could actually say to any woman who wants to leave a relationship, here's a $20,000 loan. This will get you rent. This will pay for your bills for a while you get yourself on your feet. And if you can earn income, you can pay back the loan. So there is some interesting thinking in that space. But again, it comes back to women often can't leave relationships because they don't have the financial stability or resources to do so. So they stay in situations which can unfortunately escalate into violence. So there's more money. If it's enough, I suspect it barely touches the sides.
We'll be back with more in a moment. Jessica Irvine is a senior economics writer with the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. I mean, you've been writing economics for a long time, Jess, and you do a lot on personal finance as well. Is there, and I suppose I'm moving away from the budget a little bit, for women, does more need to be done in terms of enabling them access to financial planning? We all should use a financial planner. I'm a bit of a suck for financial planners. I really think that everyone needs expert advice, because if you don't do it all your life, even people like you and I, Jess, who have been around economics for a long time, I think need a financial planner. But people who have never been in this space certainly need a financial planner. Is there something more that we should be doing to enable, even if it's not a financial planner, at least women get access to some sort of help in this area?
Yeah, I mean, the government has a separate review of financial advice and how expensive it has become to access that, given all the sort of regulations that financial planners have to, and you would hope that they do have to comply with quality standards. But I think there is such a deeper issue to do with financial literacy for men and women, and getting access to that information. There seems to be a bit of a void in the national curriculums even to give young people agency over their money and agency to make decisions. And so for women, I mean, there used to be a rallying cry in feminism that a man is not a plan. A man is not a financial plan for you. But I think we still have a lot of young people thinking that they would like to get married and have kids, and that's what they'll do, and making those decisions. I feel like there maybe needs to be a new voice for women to say, do what you want to do, go and craft the family you want to have, and do that with hope and joy. But just know that you need to be able to stand on your own 2 feet financially. And if you go off and have kids and you're not earning the income, you're actually putting yourself in a vulnerable position. And that having control and agency over your finances and your money is important for you. It's important for your kids, and it's important for your family. But it is particularly important if things don't go according to your life plan, and you always need to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. So, I mean, anything we can do to make advice more free and cheaper for people to access, and to really educate all young people, women in particular, that with the best intentions going out in life, you also need to be financially independent throughout your entire life.
Well said. Jess, thanks for talking to Fear and Greed.
No problem. It's a big issue, and thank you for dedicating an interview to it. It is interesting, at least, that we're even talking about it. We weren't doing a women's lens on the budget in many years past, so that, I guess, is a welcome conversation.
Very true. That was Jessica Irvine, senior economics writer with the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join me every morning for the full Fear and Greed podcast with all the business news you need to know. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.